still remains, all microphones will be muted by default to help keep background noise to a minimum level. If not, kindly assist us by making sure you mute your microphone when you're not speaking. When your microphone is not muted and you're speaking, avoid activities that could create additional noise, such as shuffling of papers. In other words, be mindful of background noise. Limit distractions. We can make it easier to focus on the session by turning off notifications, closing or minimizing running apps, and muting our smartphones throughout the duration of the session. Avoid multitasking. We will retain the discussions better if we refrain from replying to those emails or SMSs during this session. And in line with the cybersecurity policy, please note that anonymous questions will not be attended to. And in this regard, we mean devices without names. Kindly ensure that your devices are properly named. That is, they have your names. Then you already know we are live on our YouTube channel. If you are experiencing glitches, you can join us there as well. Questions and comments from there will be treated. The link is being pasted in the chat area, and don't forget to share the link with our members who are unable to join us here. So we are ready for our session. Distinguished fratres and sorors, our most worthy Grand Administrator and Director of the Supreme Grand Lodge, Frater Kenneth Idiodi. You're welcome, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, Rob. Fratres and sorors, it's indeed a great pleasure to have all of you present again for another session in which we more or less go back to basics to prepare ourselves for greater lessons that may be ahead of us. Let me ask that you please sit relaxed wherever you are. And in order to attain some basic level of calmness, I suggest you breathe in and out at your own pace and feel to the best of your ability some calmness within you and around you. As you breathe in and exhale slowly, send out thoughts of solace, of love, of tolerance to our fellow humans throughout the face of the earth, and try to feel at peace with yourself and with fellow humans. Continue until you find yourself in a certain state of equipoise or balance. Feel in harmony with nature and with yourself. And as you send out thoughts of love to others, love yourself also. By encouraging yourself to try to know yourself. While in this mood, let us unite in invocation. God of our hearts, God of our realization, God of all creation, we assemble in your all-pervading presence. transcending limitations of time and space on this virtual platform to reflect and contemplate those principles that will draw us closer to having some higher ideas about you, about creation. Grant us what it takes to carry on with the affairs of our lives, to your glory and the good of all. So much it be. So far this year, Fratres and Sorors, in this platform at the GES Forum, we have handled the mystical life. We have handled God and the cosmic. We have handled the God concept. And 2 weeks ago, we contemplated aligning with cosmic laws. So hopefully, those of us who have been consistent with these sessions are now familiar with the difference between God and the cosmic, have more than a fairly good idea about the various concepts we have and are entitled to have of God and about God, as well as how to align ourselves with the manner of operation of cosmic laws in order to be in attunement with God, in whose consciousness we live and move and have our being. Today, I'm suggesting that we attempt briefly to understand the difference between self and soul in order to prepare ourselves for what we can best do in fulfillment of our mission here on earth. And so, Fratres and Sorors, I want us to contemplate self and soul. In spite of the multitude of phenomena that humans experience, they can, for our purposes, be classified into two general divisions: physical and non-physical. The first classification consists of those realities, objects, and events which man can perceive by means of his sense receptor faculties, namely his eyes, his ears, his nostrils, etc. Obviously, such realities, so far as our consciousness of them is concerned, have a dependence upon our physical organism as our nervous system and brain. The second classification consists of those perceptions or experiences which are the result of consciousness of self. These are quite distinct from physical experiences. You do not exist to yourself just because you see your body or can touch your limbs. In fact, if you were deprived of all of your physical receptor faculties, you will still have a realization of yourself. It is commonly said that we feel self, but such is a verisimilitude. The fact is that the sensations of self are not like those we derive from the touch of an object. To self, there are no sensations of hot, cold, hard, or soft. Nor are there sensations of pain or pleasure. You realize that you are you, quite aside from such experiences. This consciousness of self, then, is a consciousness of our consciousness. Frases and sorrows, the human is impregnated with a mysterious vital life force. We conceive that intelligence is an attribute of this life force, or that it is at least integrated with its functioning. Patently then, this indwelling intelligence also exists in the cerebral neurons or brain cells, wherein it provides a sensitivity to those impulses which come to us through our sense organs from the world outside ourselves. In the brain, in other words, this life force and intelligence makes possible our physical experiences amounting to our objective consciousness. In addition, the highly sensitized organ of brain can and does become conscious of the sensitivity of this vital life force and intelligence existing throughout the whole being of man. The origin of these latter sensations, it is apparent, is entirely immanent. They are in no way related to the sense organs and the outside world. The function is similar to an extremely delicate instrument made to detect exterior motions, but which is likewise, because of its own sensitivity, able to discern the fine movement of its own mechanism. Therefore, fratres and sorors, the consciousness has thresholds. And by thresholds, we mean the points at which certain effects or sensations begin to occur in the brain. The thresholds for the impulses of sound and sight, for example, are considerably lower than those of the vague impressions of self. Consequently, it is comparatively easy to lose a realization of self if the grosser impulses of the sense organs dominate the consciousness of the brain. In other words, if the consciousness is exposed to a bombardment of sounds and an excitation of visual impressions, we know from our own experience that we lose momentarily a realization of self in these physical perceptions of the objective consciousness. Only, and indeed only when the thresholds of the receptor senses are partially blocked or suppressed, do we become fully aware of those more subtle impressions which reach the higher thresholds of the brain consciousness and which we experience as self. It is quite cogent that without a highly developed organ, such as the human brain, self will not exist to each of us. This does not mean to convey the idea that brain is the cause of self, nor that self is dependent upon that organ. Brain, however, is the channel by which we come to know self. It is the instrument by which our varied impulses are integrated into that notion, that state of consciousness which we define as self. For example, a large telescope is not the cause or creator of a nebula millions of light years distance. It is, however, the means by which we come to discern the existence of the nebula. It has been proved that when you remove the brain or completely inhibit its functioning, you have not destroyed the elements of self which pervade the human, but merely the means by which we exist to ourselves. Without brain, the function of self in man will be much like the simple consciousness which exists in a blade of grass. The intelligence associated with the life force in each cell of our being will function, but there will be nothing in which it will be mirrored. As the brain reflects externalities and existences that are outside of us, it likewise reflects the world within, namely self. The introversion of this consciousness of brain, its response to the inner sensitivity, is what is commonly referred to as its subconscious functioning. To the mystic, consciousness, the state of our awareness, is existence. To man, that which is conscious of is. All the powers the human is capable of exerting, whether physical, mental, or psychical, can be related only to that of which he has knowledge, that which is real to him. For example, in target shooting, if there is more than one target, a choice may be made as to which one to shoot at. If but one target can be perceived, that then becomes the object of the participant's efforts and whole attention. The mystic knows, however, that the realities of his consciousness are dual. Those things or particulars which have an objective existence as his body and the external world, and those realities of his consciousness that are inner perceptions arising from deep within himself, such as emotions, moods, inspirations, etc. This latter may become an impetus which will cause him to have objective experiences, but their origin seems to be confined to the ethereal nature of his being. To the mystic, the only separation that exists is this duality of his consciousness, the inclination to make a distinction between the realities of self and those of the objective world. Actually, the mystic understands all these realities are part of one great hierarchical order, a graduated scale. The gradation is according to the simplicity or complexity of their nature. The more complex the realities, the greater is their manifestation of the one universal intelligence. In other words, the more they represent the entire hierarchical or cosmic order. The activities of self, the realities of our inner being, are more complex in this sense than are those particulars of the material or everyday world which we experience. If, for example, the cosmic order or God, whichever you please, is the synthesis of everything, then that God obviously is complex or infinite in substance and in variety. If we become conscious of the complex or the greater evolvements or manifestations of his nature, that is to say, the more and more we become aware of the complex or the greater evolvements or manifestation of God's nature, the closer our intimacy with him and the more of him we experience. Since the causes of the sensations of self are quite intangible, are not identified with substance, and cannot be actually localized in the human body, they have always been most mysterious to man. Further, we cannot commonly experience sensations independently of the body. The body, however, at transition or the so-called death, continues as a substance for an indeterminate time before disintegration, and apparently without these elements of self. Early observers, Francis and Soros, were thus led to believe in the duality of man's nature. The body fell within the same category as all other reality that may be physically experienced as matter. How then were the intangible elements of our being identified? The conclusion was that they must transcend the world because of their inability to be experienced as of the world. These elements were held to be of divine nature because of their seeming infinity and immateriality. The soul, therefore, became the repository for all of these indeterminate qualities of man, the ancient Greek word for soul being psyche. This idea of soul gave expression to the spiritual life of man. When he considered the soul's subtle influences, its strange effect upon him as his better nature, his spiritual life changed accordingly. He tried to live in harmony with the feelings of the soul and with his comprehension of what he thought it was. How far back, fratres and sorors, we may trace the idea of soul, it is impossible to determine. It should suffice to say that archaeology today has traced this concept back to thousands of years. We find the soul described in the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and in cuneiform writing. We find references to the soul on obelisks in the Nile Valley and on clay tablets along the Euphrates, on stone monuments higher in the mountains, on ruins of ancient buildings, in the wide jungles of the tropics, and on majestic totem poles in the frozen north. Exactly how man first came to realize or became conscious of soul is, of course, a mystery which may never be solved. Still, another theory offers us a very plausible explanation. It is one that has endured for several decades. This psychological theory for the origin of the concept of soul is that it arose in the human mind when there came about a disparity between the feeling I and the external I. And this means that a difference arose between the inner I of the ego, the I of the inner self, and the external or objective I, the I that represents the physical or outer man. The Babylonians were very vague in their description of the soul. What we have been able to discern from the decipherings of their ancient writings is that they conceived of man as a dual being, possessed of a physical, mortal body, and also of an impalpable self. This impalpable self was not exactly an ethereal being or an energy or merely an influence. It was perceived by them as an actual substance, just like the physical body, except that it was of a finer composition, ground finer, if we may use that term. It is believed that Babylonians and the Assyrians imagined the soul to be something like whirling dust particles. At death, the soul was separated from the body, and the soul departed to the underworld to dwell there with other souls. It seems that the soul, according to the Babylonian concept, was constantly desirous of returning again to the living state because this was considered by the Babylonians as man's proper and normal way of existence. And the Babylonians constantly feared a congregation of these departed souls conspiring against the living. Eventually, if the living did not take the proper precautions, they would be dominated by the dead. However, the departed souls could be partially appeased if they were fed and given water. We find this Babylonian custom described not only in their writings, but also in the scenes and paintings found upon the walls of their temples. There are views of the sprinkling of water upon the graves of the departed and of the placing beside them of choice foods, something which we do in certain villages in Africa up to this moment I'm talking to you. After a lapse of about 2,000 years, fratres and sorors, we find a tremendous step forward in the concepts of soul, of God, and of the future life of the soul. During the feudal age and the empire age of Egypt, from about 1500 to 1300 BC, we find the Egyptians definitely recognizing and believing in immortality, as well as that the soul returns again to the body. We find the Egyptians hewing and chiseling passageways into solid rock cliffs and enlarging them into chambers to comprise tombs. We find them carving and making elaborate sarcophagi, mummy cases of coffins in which the body of the deceased was carefully laid and preserved. The art of embalming reached a high state for the Egyptian, desired, the average Egyptian, to preserve the body, so that the soul could again return and take possession of it. Deposited in the burial or sepulchral chamber were the worldly possessions of the departed, particularly his intimate personal belongings, such as toilet articles, his favorite chair and weapons, his jewels, his papyrus scrolls, or the chosen books of his library. We should, most of us, be quite familiar with the Christian conception of soul. Naturally, the fundamental Christian idea is modified by the various interpretations of the different sects. Generally speaking, however, Christianity considers the soul as having a continuous conscious existence. The soul has, in other words, according to the general Christian view, a self-awareness. The Christian recognizes the duality of man, the mortal physical body on one hand, and the soul, the spiritual life or being of man on the other. It now declares that both are of God. Incidentally, the early Christians did not teach this. Also, Christianity emphasizes that the soul is not absorbed into God, but retains its separate identity, and that it does not, as Hindu and Buddhist philosophies and religions contend, become completely absorbed into the universal mind or essence of God. Furthermore, Christianity does not recognize, even though there are some changes nowadays, but such controversies merely arise out of the differences of interpretation. Christianity basically does not realize the perfection of the soul. The soul of man, to the Christian, is imperfect until it has been purified, until it goes through the process of salvation. Brothers and for us, the Rosicrucian concept of soul is a truly mystical one. The Rosicrucian also begins with the recognition of the duality of man's nature. A physical earthly body composed of the dust of the earth, imbued with spirit energy, the same as all animate and inanimate things. No distinction is made between the physical nature of man's body insofar as its basic properties are concerned, and that of any other physical substance. All are considered mundane. Then, this Rosicrucian conception recognizes the soul as a spiritual and divine essence resident within the body. The Rosicrucian conception recognizes the soul as a spiritual and divine essence resident within this body during the period of its earthly existence. That is, the Rosicrucian feels and declares that the soul is unshapable. The soul has no definite concrete form that is describable or comparable with anything of a material, mundane nature. The Rosicrucian considers the soul as a sort of energy, just as thought has no physical form, yet may give rise within the consciousness to the idea of form. The Rosicrucian declares that the soul in man is not a separate entity, broken off, distinct from the soul of all other beings, but that it is part of the universal soul energy which flows through all human beings equally and alike. The soul in the most degraded individual is just as pure and as divine as the soul in the highly illuminated and spiritual being. The apparent difference which exists is a matter of expression. It is a personal reaction to the soul force within, just as the electrical energy which flows along an electrical circuit may in some light bulbs in that circuit give forth a blue light, and in others a pure white light or red light or yellow light, but the quality of the electric current is the same in all instances. The soul, therefore, in man is at all times perfect, and consequently, it cannot be perfected. To declare that the soul can be perfected, the Rosicrucian contends, is to admit of its imperfection. The Rosicrucian argues that since the soul emanates from a divine source and is the only divine essence in man, are we to declare that divinity is imperfect by stating that the soul should be perfected? Of course not. The soul manifests in each of us differently because of the psychic development of the individual. That is, his ability to react, as stated before, to the spiritual force within him. It is the ego or personality of the individual which must be perfected. Let me repeat. It is the ego or personality of the individual which must be perfected. As we develop and perfect our ego and inner personality, we eventually come to appreciate, comprehend, and realize the soul force within us. We correct our thinking, correct our ways of living, and permit the soul to express itself without hindrance. Thus, fratres and sorors, we find some individuals more illumined or illuminated than others, more spiritual than others in manifestation, but in essence, all are spiritually alike, declares the Rosicrucian. In conclusion, we may liken the consciousness of man onto a pyramid. The point or apex of the pyramid represents the objective function of consciousness, with its reliance upon the limited 5 objective senses. What the apex of this pyramid can possibly accommodate is restricted by its limited area. On either side of the apex, we drop off into seemingly nothing, or to that which is beyond the perception of the objective sense faculties. However, as we descend the size of the pyramid, it becomes more expansive. Finally, reaching the base of the pyramid, rooted in the earth upon which it rests, we find that the earth, in contrast to the limited area of the apex, holds infinite manifestations. By this example, we mean that if we introvert our consciousness, that is, turn our consciousness inwards to self, we are going from the apex of the pyramid of consciousness, from the limited objective faculties and what they reveal to us, to the essence of our being, the core of our being, which is unlimited and acquaints us with the infinite of the universe. The base of the pyramid represents the consciousness of self, the link with the soul. It is our attunement with this vast infinite intelligence which permits inspirations as impressions to come to us, to be interpreted by the brain consciousness as brilliant and revealing ideas. The more we devote ourselves to this base of the pyramid of consciousness, in other words, meditate upon and analyze self, the greater and greater it becomes to us. In summary, as regards soul, self, and soul personality, and from the perspective of our Rosicrucian teachings, we frequently and erroneously speak of the soul in man, or man's soul, as though each human being on this earth plane is a separate and distinct something which we call soul. And therefore, in 100 beings, there will be 100 souls. In 1,000 beings, there will be 1,000 souls. And in 1,000,000 beings, there will be 1,000,000 souls. This, fratres and sorors, is wrong indeed. There is but one soul in the universe, and that is the soul of God. the living, vital consciousness of God. Within each living being, there is this universal soul, and this is the soul of man. It never ceases to be a part of the universal soul any more than the electricity we talked about in a series of electric lamps on one circuit earlier is a separate amount of electricity unconnected with the current flowing in all lamps. And so the soul in man is the God in man and makes all humankind a part of God, brothers and sisters under the fatherhood of God. On the other hand, the soul personality is self, and self is an expression of the soul within the human body. The soul strives to manifest its divine nature and cosmic qualities through the objective consciousness of each human being. To the extent that each one becomes conscious of his or her divine essence, the soul, to that same extent, does self, or the soul personality, conform to it. The soul personality, then, is the objective manifestation of one's response to the unseparated segment of the universal soul with which the human is imbued. As the human being elevates this objective consciousness and becomes more sensitive to the influences of soul, the more his conduct, his thoughts come to correspond with the spiritual nature of the soul. The soul is the perfect essence in man, for it is of the universal soul essence which flows through all human beings alike. It is the personality, therefore, which each human being, within each human being, that must gradually evolve. It is the personality within each human being that must gradually evolve. This evolution consists of seeking to have the soul personality conform absolutely to the nature of the soul, to express objectively all of these inner spiritual faculties. Recall, fraternism, for us, that at the entrance of the temple of Apollo in ancient Greece, these two words were boldly written: know thyself. The question yesterday, today, and tomorrow is, what is self? And what must we do in order to know self? Mind-boggling as these words in ancient times are, and in spite of researches conducted over millennia by psychologists, psychiatrists, philosophers, and mystics, this question is still a challenge to our intellect and native intelligence till this day. Let us hope that this brief presentation becomes a cause for further reflections and contemplation and better comprehension of the relationship between soul, the soul personality, and self. I thank you for the patience you've had in sharing with me this evening your thoughts. And at this moment, I will be taking questions. And before I let you off to the moderator, I want to tell you that if we comprehend this, and I assume we do comprehend it, we, by virtue of that, begin to prepare ourselves for what we'll be taking on in the next 2 weeks, which has to be the consideration of we human beings as agents of the divine. After a session of question and answers, it will be my pleasure to close with an attunement exercise. I hand us over now to our distinguished moderator, Sarah Nefertiti.
Thank you very much, our most worthy Grand Administrator, for this beautiful session. Distinguished fratres and sirs, we have just listened to our most worthy Grand Administrator talk to us on self and soul. We will now be taking questions and comments. Please, if we are unable to take direct questions, we would humbly request you to leave it in the Q&A area. Our most worthy Grand Administrator, our first question is from Frater Prince Uzodima, and he's asking, do soul actually live after transition of this Mother Earth? Then what happens to soul after death, according to Amok teachings, against the popular Christian view?
We have explained in this presentation that there is one universal soul, and that is the soul of God. And that a segment of this soul is in each human being from the moment we were born, and continues to be in us until transition or the so-called death. When we have expressed the personality of the soul in a particular lifetime for a certain period of time. And so this is very straightforward. When we pass through transition or the so-called death, we go to a plane or level in the invisible realm, which is the mansion through which our overall evolution as individuals, soul personalities has attained. And in that mansion, begin to prepare for the next opportunity to express ourselves on the earth plane, the physical mundane plane, to continue our evolution. What I have just described is what is called reincarnation. So from incarnation to incarnation, the soul personality has an opportunity to evolve to a point where the brilliance of its light will be equivalent to the universal soul essence that it carries. When that point is reached, perfection has been achieved or attained, and there will be no need for further reincarnation, but to carry on with work in the higher realms. Next question.
Thank you very much, Amos Wadi Grand Administrator. Frater Dominic Omenai is asking, is it possible to receive the written version of your opening presentation for reflection?
The answer is yes. We are eventually going to serialize this stuff of presentations at some point in time, but not immediately.
Thank you very much. Column Emerita Mary Olatunde is asking, how did man's soul personality become corrupt?
By virtue of our interaction with the physical, objective, mundane world and realities of our existence. The divine is perfect. Whatever is less than the divine is imperfect. And the soul personality in a physical body is corrupted by that process. But then, as we learn the lessons of life and go through tests, trials, temptations, and tribulations, with our will, with our sense of direction and focus committed to the life of the soul, the true essence of the soul, and how things should be done, we gradually evolve, slowly, sometimes a little fast, over time, and through several lifetimes, to be free from this corruption. As we approach perfection, we are freer and therefore express a greater brilliance of the universal soul essence within us. Next question.
Thank you very much. Frater Donald Mpanam is asking, what is a person's true identity, the soul or the self?
Well, like I explained earlier, the soul in us is the universal soul essence that God has. In other words, by virtue of this, a segment of the universal soul is in us, and that is the God in us. The personality is self, and self is an expression of the soul within us. And so, like we said in that comparison of the electric light, let me come in a little bit to say the soul is the object. And now, therefore, we have self as the mirror. We do not fully reflect the perfection of the soul until this stained mirror, stained by what I mentioned in the previous question, answer to the previous question, gets cleaned and polished by us over time so that it reflects more brightly and brilliantly the essence of the universal soul force within us. When that point is reached, we have attained perfection. And therefore, we no longer belong to the imperfection. We don't need to take incarnation in a physical body, the gross physical body, but operate in higher realms in the spiritual realm. This is what is meant by the scriptural expression, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would not say, I go to prepare a place for you. So there are several categories in these mansions to which each of us came from, and we go either to the mansion we come from or to a loftier and better one, depending on how much effort we have put in this lifetime to strive towards perfection. And in these matters, we should try our best, but there isn't, how will I put it, hurrying too much is unnecessary, because we have to master various lessons at various stages so that we can minimize past mistakes that we have made and make the cross we carry over time a little lighter. Thank you, Columba Emeritus.
Thank you very much, Amos Wadi, Grand Administrator. I want to believe your response to this question has already dealt with this question from Frater David Mbwa Evel. The question is, what is self? Is it same as the soul personality?
We talk about self as an all-encompassing factor, really. It's an expression of the soul in the form of the soul personality. We also talk about, our outer self relating to the individuality, different from personality now, the objective, mundane things we do. And we also talk about the inner self or the inner being. And the effort we put up on this path is to strike a relationship in which, with practice and over time, through meditation, we subordinate the outer self to the inner being, so that this inner being that is the master within and that is the consciousness of God within us can dominate and take over. At that point, we begin to accelerate the evolution of our soul personality. The next question, please.
I'll be merging two questions, Amboswadi Grand Administrator. The first one is from Ocheze BQ. Do animals have soul? And Frater Adewale Okoya is asking, is man a divine being?
Thank you. Yes, we have what we call the universal soul. And as explained in my presentation, by the laws of nature, by the natural and spiritual laws available to us, all organisms are impregnated with this universal soul. Some, by our own classification, according to their level of vibrations, are erroneously classified as inanimate objects, and others as animate objects. And so we see a situation in which, from the mineral kingdom through the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, we have this gradation based on vibrations and octaves and wavelengths that vary from one threshold to another. So yes, animals have souls, and anything that has a certain awareness is impregnated with this universal force. You may consider, though, that because of, again, what I explained in the presentation about the brain being a very highly and complex mechanism, and therefore the medium by which we have certain experiences of an objective nature and enhances our reality world and our experiences subconsciously of the invisible and the higher worlds. Through the evolutionary scale and ladder, you will place as higher the human being because of his level of awareness. We progress from simple consciousness, self-consciousness, and gradually into universal or cosmic consciousness. And so the human being may be seen as the highest manifestation of cells charged with the vital life force, the universal soul, in which we are linked to God and live and move and have our being. The next question.
Thank you very much. Ikenna Obonna is asking, Wadi Grand Administrator, why the soul struggle to perfect personality in the body, that is physical mundane plane? Why then is the unification of soul and body, since the soul can be peaceful and perfectly rest in the higher realm?
Well, fine. We are talking about the real us. And through several cosmogonies and ontologies in various religions, various mystical traditions, we are aware or come to know that at a certain point, we fell from a level of grace to more or less grass. And having realized this, we are making our effort from grass back to the higher level of grace. And this is the story of creation. This is the genesis of life and living that places the mystical student and aspirant on his or her toes at all times. That we must never forget, once on this path, that some time ago, we were at a very high pedestal in creation. But out of ignorance, we fell from grace to grace. And with knowledge, we progress from grass back to grace. This knowledge is what is referred to by the admonition, know thyself. Knowing ourselves brings us closer to the true nature of self, the nature of the human being, and our body-mind-soul relationship. Bearing in mind that mind itself is an attribute of soul that gives rise to consciousness or awareness. As we become more and more aware of how the laws in creation operate and affect us, and we observe how they impact upon all creatures, how nature is indifferent, we learn to begin to flow with these laws in creation by eliminating fear, by increasing our search and focus for knowledge, for wisdom, and at all times for understanding. This is how we can begin to retrace our steps from the imperfection to the perfection, which is the level of the universal soul. This journey is called the mystical or spiritual pilgrimage. And it is the path that all of us who are into making ourselves more spiritual and expressing the spirituality within us tread. It is the path that reminds us to seek God, the divine intelligence, the supreme being, and to relate with this God. A path that reminds us to love our neighbors as ourselves and to do unto others as will be done by. A path that reminds us not to procrastinate, but to commence at whatever point we are on the path of seeking the truth that will make us free. And therefore, expressing this freedom of self without ignorance, without fear, without superstitions, to minimize the karmic consequences of our thoughts, utterances, and actions by thinking good, speaking good, and doing good as much as we can at all times. Thank you. Was that the last question?
Almost for the Grand Administrator, we have about 13 questions waiting.
Can some be lumped, or take as many as we can up to, say, for the next 15 minutes? Then we will do the closing attunement. We've done 1 hour, and we think that if we do a little more, it will be time for summarizing or concluding the forum.
Noted.
Some persons are raising hands.
Yes, but let me see if I can lump 1 or 2 questions at the moment before we'll take those raising their hands. We have Father Eludare Oladimeji is asking if the souls merge together with others after transition to be part of the singular collective universal soul, what then informs our diversities or differences in character upon subsequent reincarnation?
Okay, there is a unity in diversity. And metaphysically, therefore, there is also diversity in unity. If, as we do in physics, you take a ray of white light and transmit it through a prism, this white light splits into 7 colors: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. Continue these 7 colors through an inverted prism, and these 7 colors merge again into white light, which is a synthesis of all colors. The fact that white light passed through a prism and became 7 colors, and through another prism and white light again, does not diminish the fact that there are various colors in the color spectrum, or the rainbow for that matter. What am I saying? Yes, we all emanate from the universal soul, a segment of which is in each of us. The universal soul is the soul of God. The segment of which in each of us is the God in us. Now, our personality is our self. And this self is an expression of the universal soul essence within us as we interact with fellow humans. The fact that we pass through transition and are back to the various mansions, or if you like, the various colors of the rainbow by their various wavelengths to which we belong, does not mean in any way that we are fused into the universal soul and lost. We retain these individual personalities that we have. And this is what is being molded and is evolving over time to a level where this merging may occur because of our nearness to perfection by such a time. And as I mentioned, we don't get lost in the divinity at the core of it, but are available and must continue with the work, the great work of evolving, of assisting to evolve humanity as a whole. So at all times, one as we are in essence, we are diverse. And God Almighty is the author of both the unity and the diversity. Thank you. Which is the next one that you wanted to merge, or did this answer take care of 2 or 3 others?
That was one question that had multiple things, but I want to make about 4 questions, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, some people see ghosts of their loved ones after they might have undergone transition. Is the ghost of the individual an aspect of the soul? Then another is, what about soul families? How does becoming an AMOC student and connecting with the egregore fit into this connection? Then we have, can the soul walk without the body? And why is the earth plane laced with imperfections?
Okay, let me see how we can start this. First of all, to say that there is an axiomatic expression in Rosicrucian mystical philosophy right from the time of the sage Hermes Trismegistus, which states, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, and so on and so forth. What does this mean? By the law of correspondence, there are certain experiences we have in the earth plane that are different from the experiences we have in the spiritual plane. And there are also areas of similarity in which we can say that what is obtaining at a higher level is also obtaining at a lower level, and vice versa. And so the fact that we cannot, in the physical realm, perceive objectively more than our 5 physical senses afford us, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, etc., does not mean that we cannot develop the higher faculties or become aware of them and utilize them. Generally, some of these faculties are referred to as extrasensory perceptive, ESP, extrasensory perceptive faculties. We perceive phenomena that may not be perceived with the physical eyes, and that is clairvoyance. We hear things that may not be heard with the physical ears, and that is clairaudience. We exchange thoughts and receive thoughts or transmit thoughts, and that is telepathy. By that same notion, there are very many things we perceive about persons that may have passed through transition, and therefore we may name them in various ways, e.g., people having impressions about ghosts, etc. What we should realize as it pertains to Rosicrucians, for instance, is that we are just like other human beings. The laws of nature is indifferent. What happens to every other human being happens to a Rosicrucian. But there's normally a difference how we react as Rosicrucians to things that happen to us. In fact, as a general rule of life and living, what matters is not what happens to you, but how you react to it, how you handle it, how you manage it, how you administer it, your attitude towards it, and so on and so forth. The more knowledgeable we are, and this is where and what gives the Rosicrucian an advantage, because of our deliberate efforts to study nature, our deliberate efforts to know self, we attach no superstitions to things that happen. It's either we know what has happened or we do not know. What we know, we embrace and demonstrate practically. What we do not know, we investigate and explore. And with knowledge, what seemed to be superstitious is understood. I can tell you that the egregore of the order bonds us to one another, and with the hierarchy structure of the order, visibly and invisibly. All of us are committed to the investigation, study, and practical application of natural and spiritual laws for the attainment of three things, basically: health, happiness, and peace. And to that extent, committed to a knowledge of the mysteries, the mystical nature of our universe. We have a higher perception, having exposed and elevated our consciousness of many experiences that human beings have and find scary. And it is to this extent that we can say that knowledge is power. So there should be no fear of the experiences we have here or of the unknown or the afterlife. There is life after transition or the so-called death. There's certainly life after life. And a lot of research has been done in these areas to convince us that we are essentially immortals by virtue of our spiritual nature, and that we were alive yesterday, we are alive today, and will be alive tomorrow after transition or the so-called death, howbeit in a different realm of expression and manifestation, meaning that we are actually immortal in essence and we live forever. Thank you. The next question.
Thank you very much. I'm also the Grand Administrator. I will be making two questions. Ogwe Ochai is asking, from what you have explained already, it is clear that the Rosicrucian definition of soul is different from the Christian and Muslim definition of it. If there is a Christian or Muslim in the Rosicrucian order, wouldn't this cause some kind of confusion and a conflict of faith in the Christian or Muslim faithful? In such a case, what would be your advice to such an individual? And if the individual accepts the Rosicrucian perspective, doesn't that make him automatically separate from Christianity or Islam, which teaches him not to associate with any partner, associate any partner with Allah and something similar in Christianity? I was thinking I'm going to add another question, but this is quite large, so I would allow you to answer this.
And then the other one can come later if we have time.
Yes.
Let's make this clear. The Rosicrucian mystical philosophy harmonizes all the various religious beliefs that we know of in the world, because part of the study on the Rosicrucian path is comparative religion. We also study comparative philosophies of the various philosophers from ancient times, the Egyptians, the Greek philosophy and the Greek philosophers, European philosophers, modern philosophers from the new worlds of America, and our own indigenous philosophies. We have African philosophers and persons who are illumined, who have expressed themselves in all cultures. So the Rosicrucian conception is a much broader and higher perspective, and does not mean, for goodness sake, that the knowledge we have had in the basic religions that we may belong to, e.g., Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, have taught us anything false? No. For analogy, when you started life in your education, you went through perhaps crèche, nursery, kindergarten, primary education, secondary education, tertiary education in polytechnics or university, etc., etc. And then after you finish with all these academic things, and even while in there, you still have knowledge and education from parents by virtue of your upbringing, from peer groups, from persons older than you in society, etc., and all that. Now, the fact that you have graduated from college, polytechnic, or university does not nullify the knowledge you had in the secondary school. The fact that you graduated from secondary school does not nullify the knowledge you had in the primary school. At the low level, you lay the foundation, you acquire the basics, and lay the foundation for greater knowledge. This organization is, as I say all the time, a school of learning. The Rosicrucian order, ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, ancient and modern mystical order Rosicrucis, as I say, is a school of learning and a university of life. All what we know by virtue of being Christians or Muslims is good knowledge. And it's a very good foundation for a more sophisticated and complex enterprise like the study of esoteric philosophy, of mysticism, which is not magic or mysterious, but a direct, intimate, and immediate awareness of the supreme intelligence through the domain of self or the subconscious mind. So certainly, after all of this knowledge, each and everyone is admonished to see himself or herself as a child, learning from each and every person. If you have a new baby in the family, you, father and mother, will learn from this baby how natural and spiritual laws work, just as you learn from yourself and from others. So the Rosicrucian order, Amok, is a school of continuous and continuing education. We don't stop. Every day offers a learning opportunity. When you join the order, we tell you to momentarily set aside all previous notions and ideas that you have. And so a fundamental question in the application form is, will you accept with an open mind new ideas pertaining to yourself and the universe? If your answer is no, we cannot admit you. It's not a matter of you have a lot of money to pay for this education. It's a matter of whether you have a mind that is open enough to be receptive to new knowledge based on your own assessment and evaluation and commitment towards spiritual progress for yourself. If you don't have the open mind, you don't have to become a member. If you have an open mind, you will not see any teaching of this organization as diminishing your religious beliefs or making you feel that there is a conflict between Christianity, Islam, and Rosicrucianism. I haven't seen any in 55 years of membership. No. What I have seen is an increased understanding of how one principle relates to another. From the monographs I received, which are consecrated to truth and dedicated to every Rosicrucian. If we know the truth, it will make us free from the tentacles of dogmatism. We said it at the beginning of this series, that merely accepting God because your parents have presented to you a certain notion of God, which was presented to them by their parents, who are your grandparents, and so on and so forth, is not doing the mystical job. Our approach is that we should seek from within us how to arrive at a conclusion about the nature of God. And all what we are reading outside, whether it is the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas or the Upanishads or the Holy Bible or the glorious Quran and so on and so forth, offer us an opportunity how to go into the innermost self, in our innermost beings, because the kingdom of God is within us. And is, of course, not restricted to churches, mosques, or Rosicrucian temples, because all of these are within us. The human being is a microcosm, a small universe, within a macrocosm, a bigger universe. And so, if you come into the order and you are still clinging tenaciously and dogmatically to what you have been taught in various religions, you are not ready for our knowledge. What you have been taught in the various religions is valid. And what you will learn from the Rosicrucian principles will enhance the validity of that knowledge and give you a greater understanding of what may have appeared to you to be mysterious prior to now. And now you have an opportunity to grow spiritually, understand the Bible more, understand the Quran more, understand the Bhagavad Gita more, etc. So if you are seeing conflicts, these conflicts are the impediments of your own perception, and not that of an organization that has told you from the beginning that you should accept with an open mind new ideas pertaining to yourself and the universe, of which you are a very small dot. If we have this at the background of our minds, we shall not see these conflicts. What we'll see is a harmonization of the various concepts within us that we have inherited or imbibed from the way we were raised at birth, the primary education we have received, the secondary education and higher education we have received, and education we have received by observation and interaction with fellow human beings. It is not good for human beings to say, we who are rivers people, our parents brought us up with the canoe or boat, and that should be the only means of transportation. We who are land people, we have motors, trucks, and this should be the only means of transportation. We have trains shuttling between here and there, only the train. You know, you are free to travel from Nigeria to Britain for 6 weeks in a ship, an ocean liner. But you also have the choice available by further education and development and sophisticated transportation to fly this same distance in just 6 hours. The choice is yours. And the Rosicrucian is telling you that if you want to spend 1,000 years to reach so and so point, that is your choice. But we are telling you that this thing, this progress from grace, from grace to grace, can, with greater understanding, be made in a shorter time. And when we say a shorter time, we are ourselves not saying that there is any quantum overnight leap in consciousness from what you are now to what you will be in 6, 7, 50 years' time. It's a gradual process. But the more we know, the more we are humbled by the fact that we have so much yet to learn and to know. And if you are from head to toe contented with your Christian faith or your Islamic faith, and you say, this is enough for me, perfect. There's no quarrel with that. In fact, within Christianity or Islam, there are grades, and I mentioned in this presentation, in a hierarchical order. There are several levels of understanding the Bible of the Christians or the Quran of the Muslims. There are gradations in degrees of understanding. But strive to understand, you must. And the more you understand, the more you will find that all the religions are not in conflict with one another. In fact, it's all over WhatsApp images and the social media. The fact that Christianity and Islam are very similar. So if we are expressing these religions and finding violence, and the two religions are talking about peace, the fault is not with the religions, but in our misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the various dogmas and creeds they propagate. We must call ourselves to order by striving to understand what each religion propagates. And if we do that, we will find that the various religions are from the various angles of the pyramid of learning, progressing towards the apex. And at the apex, all religions are one. You will find that there is no religion that is higher than truth, that is higher than universal love, that is higher than forgiveness, that is higher than live and let's live. So in all thy learning and in all thy quest, seek understanding, and it shall be well. One more question, and that will be it.
Thank you very much, Amboswadi Grand Administrator. One comment and the question. So the comment is for you. I want to thank the GA for his untiring efforts in enlightening us on topical issues of our teachings. Thank you very much, sir, and peace profound. From Joshua Izerechai of Nirvana Lodge, Saple.
Thank you very much, Frater Joshua.
And then we have this question from Basil Unguchuku. The last question. Greetings, most worthy Grand Administrator. Thank you for your continued enlightenment. From ancient Greek, the injunction, man know thyself, or know thyself, has been there. My question is, what is the difference between soul and spirit? According to some belief system, it said that some individuals who did not live a good life, when they pass on, their soul continue to hover around, and that's what is called evil spirits. So are there good spirits and evil spirits?
Thank you. We have said, as above, so below, as within, so without, etc., and all that. We have also, in this presentation, talked about duality at various levels. And that duality means there is left, there is right, there is good, there is bad, there is evil, and there is, good, etc., and all that. So if you are thinking along the line of spirits, yes, there will be good spirits, and also there will be evil spirits. In most schools, or many schools, the terms soul and spirit are used interchangeably, but that is also loosely. But from the point of view of Rosicrucians, we use the term spirit relating to the essence of matter, and the vibrations that go with that. The soul we look at as the universal divine essence, and that there is only one soul. What appears to be a multiplicity of souls is, as we explained earlier, soul personalities. So we can say we have a population of nearly 8 billion human beings on Earth. By that we mean there are 8 billion soul personalities, but there is only one soul, and this is the universal soul of God, which is segmented into each of these 8 billion human beings, and more into all other living organisms, that we have talked about. So now, it should be clear, therefore, that from the Rosicrucian point of view, anytime we are saying from the Rosicrucian point of view, we are using our terms, our terminology. And at the beginning of our study program in the order, these terms are spelled out. A lot of effort is made to dwell on them so that when we go into the more complex aspect of the studies, the finer shades of differentiation between these terms will be obvious. We do also have, for instance, in the course of the order's teachings, the Martinist teachings. And the Martinist teachings, have a reference to spirit, which from the Rosicrucian parlance, we also talk about soul. And so this is why I say that depending on the school of thought you belong to, there are fine shades of differences, but in the end, the basic principles are the same. I think this is about as much as we can say on this last question. And so with that, let us remain committed to doing good so that we ourselves can be seen as good soul personalities, good spirits, shall we say, good human beings, and goodness is the nature of the Supreme. So on this note, I want to ask all of us to please sit relaxed wherever we are and commence some breathing in and out at your own pace without holding the breath, or when you exhale without holding out. So let's take in a deep breath and hold it for as long as we can without any discomfort, and immediately exhale slowly and without holding out another deep breath. This in and out, Rosicrucians describe as neutral breathing. And we should do this until we find ourselves in a state of equipoise, balance, and harmony. And while doing this, begin to pay attention to the fact that within each of us is a quiet, serene center where one can go to garner strength, regain composure, to find answers and grow in spiritual stature. This is our soul center where we commune with the God of our hearts, the God of our realization, the God of our deepest understanding, indeed, the God of all creation. It is important that we go there every day to seek renewal and guidance. During such periods we devote to going inwards, we find strength and serenity to meet, conquer, and overcome life's challenges, to begin to realize that the soul within us is directly a segment of the universal soul of God, and is therefore the God in us to which we refer and are trying to understand when we say God of our hearts, God of our realization, God of our comprehension, God of our understanding. And because this universal soul of God is within us and in also fellow human beings, this is the God of all creation, omniscient, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, omnipresent and ubiquitous, present everywhere at the same time. And indeed, it is in the consciousness of this divinity that we live and move and have our being. It is this factor that bonds us with fellow human beings and makes us brothers and sisters under the fatherhood of God. With these thoughts in mind, let us remember that there is a celestial sanctum within us and around us, over, above, and beyond us, which represents the highest plane of consciousness that can be achieved when attuning oneself with the cosmic. This inner sanctuary, or the celestial sanctum, is the realm of purification, regeneration, revelation, and illumination. It is to this realm, this field of cosmic energy, that we go to petition for the health, happiness, harmony, welfare of others, and the overall well-being of ourselves, as well as for peace on earth. And now I ask you to pay attention to your feet, the left and the right simultaneously, in contact with the floor, in contact with the earth. And begin to raise your consciousness from the feet through your thighs, from the ankle, the knees, through your thighs to the waist. Feel also the energy vibrating as you breathe in and out, and concentrate on your palms, the left and the right palms, through your hands up to your shoulders. As you breathe in and out, feel your consciousness from your waist region through the lower organs, the kidneys, up to the lungs, the heart, to your neck. As you continue with this, breathing in and out, feel the energy from your waist through the spine coming up also to the area of the neck. With your next deep breath, center your consciousness in the center of the head. Feel the vibrations of your breathing impacting positively on your eyes, the nostrils, various psychic centers within the head. And at this point, Feel your entire being receptive to higher knowledge, receptive to wisdom, and with that, coming from within the God, from the God within, the consciousness of God within, feeling that when you enter the celestial sanctum, whatever is bothering you will be made simple and understandable, and therefore can be solved. Same for whatever is bothering our common humanity. With these thoughts in mind, I ask that we now all take in a deep breath and acknowledge the light of God within and around us, and so that when we are ready to exhale, our entire beings and auras are charged with the sublimity of divine light, the brilliance of divine light, and the synthesis of all colors of divine light. With the second deep breath, let us acknowledge the vital life force, the breath of life, the breath of God within us and around us. And so that when we are ready to exhale, our entire beings and our auras become charged with the vitality of divine life. Finally, with the third deep breath, let us acknowledge the love of God, a universal, impersonal love that we may never know. And so that when we are ready to exhale, our auras and our entire beings are charged with the sublimity of divine love. And now let us feel ourselves in a spherical ball of the light, life, and love of divine effulgence. While feeling the sensitivity of this moment, let us unite in invocation. May the divine essence of the cosmic infuse our beings and cleanse us of all impurities of mind and body, that we may attune the celestial sanctum in pureness and perfect dignity. So much it be. Let us now, inside this spherical bowl of light, life, and love, raise our consciousness to a point above the head, higher and higher beyond the building where we are, beyond the village, town, or city, beyond the state, country, or continent, higher and higher, beyond low clouds, medium clouds, high clouds, to a realm above, our solar system, our galaxies, to the center of the universe. And feeling the sacred place we designate as our celestial sanctum. Free from the objective, material, and mundane realities. To remain receptive to the Master within, the consciousness of God within us, the divinity within us. There, we raise a prayer for all of humanity and ourselves as part of humanity. God of our hearts, God of our realization, we are thankful for light, life, and love, and for our presence with you at this moment as we meditate for your divine healing for all of humanity. May we find solace for all of us who are in sadness, sickness, or sorrow. May we have more as we work hard at our individual and collective levels for health, happiness, and harmony, for progress, prosperity, and peace profound. And may our individual and combined efforts manifest your glory on earth by our acts of service to our fellow humans. So much it be. We now make our individual petitions to the God of our hearts, the God of our realization. So that we return back to our mortal bodies, reinvigorated, rejuvenated, with a sense of direction and focus to continue our mystical studies for our personal good and the good of all. We'll observe a few moments of meditation and attunement. Silently, solemnly, and permit the lights of our petition to merge with the solution coming from the divinity within us. May the grace of God sanctify our individual and collective achievement with the celestial sanctum. So much it be. And now, brothers and sisters, let us begin to return by the same route we ascended, through the various galaxies and systems, through our solar system, the clouds, to the various continents, the countries, the cities, towns, villages, and hamlets we are, to the building, and finally to ourselves. And become aware now of our objective surroundings. Brothers and sisters, in 2 weeks' time, Thursday, I think the 1st of April, we will be at the GS Forum contemplating humans as agents of divinity. Humans as divine agents. I thank you all who have taken pains to participate, and know that those who have their sanctum sessions this evening will flow into it depending on the time zone in which you are. Others will reflect and contemplate in their sanctum upon self, upon soul personality, and begin to establish the bridge that we have all been constructing between our outer selves and our inner beings, so that our progress on the path is steady, sure, and on solid ground. If it pleases the moderator to unmute, we should be in a position to just say bye-bye to one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos, for the Grand Administrator. Yes, we would unmute everyone. We will. While we're doing that, Amos, for the Grand Administrator, would also say thank you very much. You are our inspiration, and we remain very grateful for these enlightening sessions. And then to our attendees, we appreciate your time and efforts. Amos, for the Grand Administrator, has already mentioned that. And we look forward to having you at our next session, which is 1st of April, like he rightly said. Amos, for the Grand Administrator, we are having a webinar, not a meeting, so we might not be able to unmute everyone, except we have to migrate them to the panelist platform.
It's okay. Peace profound, everybody.
All right, on this note, thank you for your time, everyone, and have a good night.